Hi everyone, Armored Pants here, and I have another video for you in the American line. This is the Tier 8 heavy tank, the T26E5. It's on sale at the moment on Black Friday. It's very good price. One of my picks for a Good Friday buy, so I thought I would do a review, and I haven't done one yet. Before we get into the review proper, just a reminder that we recently opened the Discord channel for this YouTube channel, so please come along. You will be very welcome there. You can ask questions, get answers, you can talk tanks, tactics, whatever you like. There's some other cool tankers and YouTubers on there, so please come and join us. You'll be very welcome, and there'll be a link in the description. Now let's have a look at the tech spec, and for that we will use blitzhanger.com as always. Now this is an excellent premium tank. Right now it's also an excellent price in the shop. If you're watching this after Black Friday and it's not available, well, take note and get it next time it is available, because it's a really good tank. That said, it can be difficult to play, and much like the Shark review which we just did recently, the reason for that is that it's not a pure heavy tank, right? It's not tip of the spear type tank where you go use your really good armor profile to see strategic points on the map, right? So it's more what you might describe as a Heavium, that is like a kind of fast moving heavy tank, but it has amazing strengths, and if you play to those strengths, this tank, just like the Shark which we recently reviewed, the T54E2, this T26E5 tank, otherwise known as the Sheriff, because of its unique and legendary camo, has amazing strengths and can be very effective. Now before we go into having a look at all of its tech specs, let's have a look at it in garage, and let's have a look at the tank setup, because I know a lot of you often ask, okay, how should I set up this tank to optimize its performance? So you can see here on this account, I've just bought this tank in the Black Friday sale, so it's just arrived in. So first thing we're going to do is obviously set up the camo. Now the camo, as you can see, legendary camo, the Sheriff camouflage is available here. So I have a bit of extra spare gold, so I decided to buy that. It's 1,400, and then I'm going to use that across summer, winter and desert, right? So we set up the camo and it's ready to roll. So now we have the T26E5 has now just become the Sheriff, and they're new Sheriff in town, hombre. So let's have a look at the consumables. So I'm going to use 2 repair kits and run adrenaline. As you can see here, I believe that is probably best for utilization of the key assets and strengths of this tank. I don't need to use engine accelerator with this tank, because when we look at the tech spec, you'll see it has an excellent power to weight ratio, so you don't need it. In terms of provisions, I'm going to use Coca-Cola, cola, and improved fuel to max out the view range, max out your reload, etc. And in terms of ammo loadout, this tank actually has pretty good pen numbers. It has better pen numbers than the Shark, than the T54E2 that we just looked at, even though it has a smaller gun, has a 90mm gun. The Shark has a 105mm gun, but it has actually better pen numbers on everything except HE. We'll have a look at those in detail in a second. In terms of setup, I'm going to use calibrated shells, supercharge, and refined gun. The reason for that is that, 90mm gun, you want to have more pen, but it has a really good reload. It's only 6.2 seconds, so you can run calibrated shells. So as I said, I'm going to use cola, improved fuel, case of cola, and to max out the performance, right? So we just looked at that in the in-game setup. We said it has a 90mm gun, and even with calibrated shells, it's 6.2 second reload. So you can fire often in this tank, which is great. AP is the AP penetration is 232, heat, which is your Pramos 292, and you get 50mm with HE. And that is actually, except for HE, is better than the Shark, but has a bigger gun. So it's good. There's a good pen in this tank for the size of the gun. That does 240, 200, and 270 damage points respectively. So it's low alpha, but remember you're firing a round off just over every 6 seconds. 1327 meters per second muzzle velocity with AP and heat, and HE is 1300, so there's almost no difference. So therefore shell management is pretty easy in this tank as well. And here's a figure to look at, guys. Its gun index, its gun handling index is 17.4. It is superb for a tier 8 heavy tank. To put this in context, it's 3.4 better than a Jagdpanther 2. And it's just 3 less than a grill. You know, it's really, really good. Its mobility index is 3.34, which is really good for a tier 8 heavy, and it has a superior power to weight ratio. So this tank is mobile, right? This is why I said it's more a Heavium than a medium tank. If we look at the armor profile, you can see that it has this massive gun mantlet, right? So it's very, very difficult to pen. You know, and that's important, right? Because when you look at the concealment numbers, if you take something like an RE251, which has a view range of 304 meters, he will spot you up 274 meters if you're still, 292 meters when you fire, and 286 meters when you're moving. So you're going to get spotted up early and often in this tank. Although you do have a good view range for a heavy tank at 282.5 meters, so that's pretty good for a heavy tank. And actually, you'll see in one of the games that I get a scouting badge, which, you know, is pretty unusual in a heavy tank, but it shows the capability of this tank, and that's the combination of that view range and that agility, that mobility, that ability to get around the map and get out there and spot early on. Now, it has 10 degrees of gun depression and 20 degrees of elevation, so therefore, what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that this is basically a hull down tank, right? That turret armor, that huge gun mantlet, and that gun depression mean that if you get into a hull down position in this tank, you can farm damage, and it's almost impossible to pen you. And even the couple at the top, as we saw, is difficult to pen. It's quite well armored. See here when you look straight on at the tank, if tier 7 and tier 8 against you, almost impossible to pen. Tier 9, obviously the front of the tank is vulnerable, but even then, even when you're up tiered, the turret is almost impossible to pen. Of course, it has some vulnerable points, but really small targets and very, very difficult to pen. So this tank is basically a tank that allows you to get into hull down positions quickly in the game, and then it provides you with the toolbox in terms of its gun depression and armor that allows you to then farm damage there. And we're going to have a look at a game in the gameplay which occurs on Vineyards, and you'll see I get into a hull down position there, and I'm able just to farm damage and do a bit of a carry in that game as well. So in terms of tactics, obviously you can do long range sniping, etc. But you know, the ideal thing you're looking for in this tank is to use the good power to weight ratio to get into a position where you can adopt this hull down profile against the enemy, and then use calibrated shells, supercharged and refined gun, and that amazing gun index of 17.4 to farm damage. And you're going to see, by the way, some of the shots you can pull off in this tank are quite spectacular if you have it set up that way to maximize the gun efficiency and maximize that gun handling index to the best of your ability. And you're going to see some really, really good shots using that spectacular gun handling within the game. The first game we're going to look at is on Desert Sands, and there's some really, really interesting shots coming up there, so take note of those. But as I said, guys, you know, just to recap, this is not your classic heavy tank, right? So don't go front line it, don't go tip of the spear, even if you're top tier, because it doesn't have that frontal armor like the German VK range, like the IS range, etc. at tier 8, like some of the Chinese heavies. To bounce shots, to angle up, and to be that tip of the spear, and to absorb punishment for your team. You'll be penned. Anybody can pen you, even tier 7 medium tanks will be able to pen you front on the lower plate. So they're not the tactics for this tank. Play to its strengths and you will do well in it. But I guess that's why some people find it difficult to play, because they're trying to play it as a standard heavy, and that's not what this tank is about. So, you know, as we look at the setup here, and we'll wait for the countdown, I decide that, you know, given the setup and also given the strength of this tank, I decide to go into the desert. So basically you're kind of going where a medium tank would normally go, right? The heavy tank channel is towards A, sometimes towards B, but I decide to go the medium light tank channel. Why? Well, this tank is mobile enough to get me into a position where it can support the meds pretty quickly. This terrain on this map in this location with these sand dunes is perfect for getting into some hull down positions. So I'm guessing at the start of the game that I'm going to be able to be quite effective by going into the desert, going into hull down positions, and being able to hopefully farm some damage. And as it turns out, those tactics actually pay off. So I'm going into a position here where I'm, you know, pretty much hull down. I can pop over, use my gun depression and put in some shots. And I want to draw your attention to this shot here, right? This is the shark, right, which we just reviewed, right? Very, very difficult to pen into the turret, but it has that cupola which is vulnerable. And look at that shot with this gun system. You know, small target, but it delivers, you know, bam, nice shot into him. And pretty much guessing he wasn't expecting that. There's another one into the same spot. Because when you're in a position like that, just showing your turret in the shark, the T26E5, you're expecting that to be penned, right? And you saw that when I did a review of that, when I get into those hold down positions, I was able to bounce shots, right? But if you have, and by the way guys, going back to what we spoke about many times on this channel, and why you should watch tank reviews, that even if you don't have a tank, is that so you know the weaknesses and you can make shots like that. If I had not just reviewed the shark, I probably wouldn't have known that cupola was so vulnerable, and you know, then I'm able to kill him with a shot right into the cupola, right? And of course, understanding my tank here means that I know that I have a really good and accurate gun system. I'm just going to slow this down so that you can have a look at it again. People think that the top of the super Pershing is impenetrable. That's not true. There is that weak part there just to the side of the gunman that you saw me pen it there. I just wanted to highlight that for you. You saw earlier there I had what I called a shot on spec. Pretty sure I wasn't going to pen the super Pershing given the angle that I had to fire at into his turret. But when you've got a fast firing tank like this, it's really possible to take those shots on spec, and you never know. Sometimes they go through. RNG allows them to go through, and sometimes you can blow a module even if you are kill a crew member, injure a crew member, even if you are not penning the tank proper. You can't really do that if you've got a really long reload, right? Because it means that, you know, you've got to wait so long for your next shot. But when you've got a fast loading tank, then why not, right? You only got to wait 6 seconds for your next shot, so why not fire one and see what happens, right? So, and I've said that before, that's why I really like fast firing tanks, because it allows you to have far more engagement in the game than you can with slow firing tanks. You can do things like track enemies, put shots in on spec as I did there, and if they don't pen or you don't do any damage, it doesn't really matter because you've got another round loaded up pretty quickly. And that's another thing you can do in this tank because of its fast reload. As I said, even with calibrated shells, it's just over 6 seconds, which is fantastic for tier 8 heavy, right? You get low alpha, of course, but just bear in mind that you're putting in 2 to 3 rounds for some of the heavies in tier 8. So, you know, you're more than compensating for your low alphas. Plus, you have that added advantage of being able to do damage and do things like tactical damage, like tracking, etc., that may not do actual damage to hit points because of that fast firing gun system that you have. So there we go, second class mastery badge. Nothing spectacular in there, but I think a pretty good example of utilizing the tank's strengths, going hold down, using its mobility, and using that excellent gun system to make some really important and difficult shots. I'm going to have a look at some more gameplay. This is a first class mastery badge. Again, playing to the strengths of the tank, playing the tank by the numbers, you know, understanding its characteristics, and then just executing those within the game. I've said many times before on channel, I'm not a naturally gifted player at this game. You know, I am not Meadsy or one of these people who are just naturally good at this game. I just was a terrible player and I had to learn everything the hard way. But the good news about that is that there's nothing I do in a game that you can't do. Even if you're a player watching this with only 200 games under your belt, or you're a player who has a low win rate and doesn't think they're so good at the game, let me tell you that I was down there at a 37% win rate when I started playing this game first. You're probably not as bad as I was, so you can do what I did. You can become a good player. I think I'm a good player now, and you can just imitate, copy, and adapt the tactics and the things that I do in these games. There's nothing in here that you cannot do. Quite often when I was learning how to play the games and I watched other YouTubers, there were things in the game that I didn't really understand and I wasn't really sure I'd be able to do. But, you know, I don't think I ever do anything spectacular in a game, you know. I'm a kind of steady Eddie. So, you know, anything I do with this tank or any other tank, you can do, right? And that's the message, right? So, you know, just it's just a matter of practice. It's just a matter of understanding the dynamics and mechanics of the game, and then you can do it too, right? You see there, right? Fluff the shot, you know, no problem. You know, when you've got a fast reloading gun like this, very easy to just correct your mistake and fire it into him. And okay, fluff the first shot, that let's call it a ranging shot, and then the next one, bam, next two very nice pens on that pattern. So, you know, this position here in this map, if you're in a tank that is capable of hold down positioning, is really, really strong. You can pretty much sit here all day if you don't get rushed and pushed onto by a number of other enemy tanks and farm damage. Very, very difficult for them to pen you. You can pen them all day long. You can see there the gun system. I don't need to switch up the Pramo, and I can still pen the KV5 even front on. That's a sign of a really, really, really good gun system. Switch target at the last moment there, clear off my old nemesis. And by the way, you can see the velocity trails whizzing by me here. They're from the Black Prince, who's over capping A, and he is firing shots at me, and he is missing consistently. It must be really, really frustrating for him, because he is firing shots at me and they're just whizzing by because I'm rocking backwards and forwards, and I am, you know, making it really, really difficult, frustrated. There's another one whizzes by from him, and he is not having a good day, and you can see his frustration in evidence in a couple of minutes, because he just decides he's had enough and he rushes me. KV5 now has also come out of the town to do some damage, but I know with my reload and my gun system I can take him out. I'm going to take a couple of hits to do it. I can't back up and any further because the Black Prince is behind me, but I'm more than happy to take 2 shots from him to clear him off. We're in a 3v2 situation here, and I was going to go and help my ally, but look, I told you, the Black Prince, he's had enough. He just comes at me, right? Get a bounce off him. Now, the problem with brawling with a Black Prince is that its rate of fire is off the charts, and you can see it here. Even with my good rate of fire, which is 6 seconds, his rate of fire is just off the charts. And he gets another round into me here. He must have dropped adrenaline as well, because I didn't think he was going to get that last round into me. And yes, I get lucky. I'm down now to double-digit hit points, 64 hit points. But we've got it down to 2v1 situation. So me taking to KV5 and then taking out him allowed us then to get down to 2v2, and now it's a 2v1 situation. But while against a normal tank you would think you're going to win, that is not necessarily the case when you're playing against an auto loader, because normally you would go in while a heavy tier 8 tank is reloading. You'd have, you know, anything from 8 to 12 seconds to get in and kill him. You can't with him, right, because he already has another round loaded up. But the advantage we have here is points, and that's why it's very important in these situations to always look at the points counter if you're playing Supremacy, because that tells you who needs to move. He needed to move, I didn't. I could just sit there all day and I would have gotten the win anyway, so he had to move, and then allows you to get the kill. And that's why, as we've always said, when you're playing Supremacy, get your points on the board as early and as often as possible, because when it comes to the end game, it can give you an advantage, as I had there, right? He could have been a far superior player to me, you know, a super unicum super player, but he still has to move and he has to come out somehow, because he's going to lose on points. It's basic mathematics versus time. So that gave me an advantage by having the points on the board earlier. So overall, a good example of the gameplay of the strengths of this tank. You saw there, steel wall, scout badge, top gun badge, all delivered, first class mastery badge. And there is the toolbox in action. For most of the game I was hull down on this tank, utilizing the excellent gun system, the fast reload, strong turret armor to get bounces and wreak havoc upon the enemy. So let's have a recap of the key strengths and characteristics of this tank before we go. And it has a lot of key strengths, so I think it's good to have a recap of those, but it's also important to talk about what it isn't. And as we said before, it is not a standard heavy. But so let's have a look at these in the recap. So firstly, key point is don't play as a standard heavy. If you do, you'll find it very frustrating and you'll say, this is a crap tank, I don't like it, Armored was talking bullshit, because you're not playing to its strengths then, right? Its strengths are its turret, its mobility, and its gun system. There its key strengths. Really accurate, really good gun index, fast loading, mobility, power to weight ratio, and a turret excellent. These are an excellent toolbox. So use that toolbox. Get into positions in the map where you can utilize that and cause havoc for the enemy, because this is a hold down monster, and with the gun system, as you saw particularly in the second game, this tank is formidable when you play to its strengths. To utilize those strengths and to maximize them, I would run calibrated shells, supercharged and refined gun, and I'd also run 2 repair kits and adrenaline. That's my recommended setup that works for me. Of course, if you have a different playstyle, you can adapt that and adopt that as you see fit. But that's how I had it set up in both the games that you looked at. As we said, this is a Heavium. It's a great tank, it's great fun, but don't play as a standard heavy. I know I've said it a few times, but I do want to emphasize it because, you know, I've seen players struggle with this and the Chieftain and other tanks that are Heaviums because they're playing them as they would play a standard heavy, and that's not what this tank is for. So if you bear that in mind, you will have great success playing this tank. So cheers, Mush. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. And I guess now all that remains for me to say is pants off.
That's all, folks.